Hi, this is Mr. Doro. Today we're going to be talking about chemical reactions. Our objective today is to be so that the student will be able to learn to write chemical equations from word equations. This will put into practice what we did last unit on nomenclature and checking charges also. We need to start out by figuring out how to write a chemical equation. Now, to write a chemical equation, we need to start with our starting materials, which we call the reactants right here, and our ending materials, which are the products. Now, in between those, you're going to have an arrow, and the arrow is going to be pointing towards the products. Now, many times in the chemical reaction or chemical equation, you are going to have different symbols that you'll see. Sometimes those symbols there'll be a little G in parentheses, and that little G in parentheses means that the material is in the gaseous form, or it's a gas. Sometimes there'll be an L in parentheses. That L means that it is a liquid. That doesn't change anything about it, but sometimes that's helpful information. And sometimes there'll be an S, meaning that it is a solid. Other times you'll see AQ. AQ means it is an aqueous solution, and that means that it is dissolved in water. Some symbols that we need to know are whenever we see an arrow, the arrow means yields or produces. There'll be a plus sign that we'll see depending on which side this is on. If it's on the reaction side, it means reacts with, and if it is on the product side, it just really means and. So I'm going to put reacts with or and. There are some other symbols that you might see sometimes. The triangle, if you see a triangle, that means that there was heat added to it. And sometimes above the arrow you'll see something, maybe something like KCl. And what that means is this is a catalyst. A catalyst takes part in the reaction. It usually speeds the reaction up. But the thing is, it does not appear in the reactants or the products. It just takes part in the intermediate processes. We're going to go through a sample chemical equation. This is a word equation in the example. It says sodium metal reacts with chlorine gas to produce solid sodium chloride. All you got to do is watch on this one. You'll be able to practice here in just a second. But I want to show you some things that you should be looking for. There are some terms in here that we know already. The reacts with, we know what symbol goes in for that. To produce, we know what symbol goes in for that also. After the to produce, it's going to have the products. Before the produce, usually before the produce, it will tell you what the reactants are. So what we're going to do is write out this chemical equation. We're going to write out a skeleton equation, which means that it's not balanced. We'll learn how to balance them later. First thing we have to do is says that there is sodium metal. The symbol for sodium is Na. So we write Na. The metal tells us that it's a solid. Now we won't always write this, but I'm going to write it this first time here just so we know that we're not confused about the part that says metal. It says reacts with. The reacts with means we put a plus there. Chlorine gas. Now chlorine is Cl, but remember, chlorine is one of those diatomic elements, which means that it cannot stand alone. So if it's not joined up with anything, then it has to be Cl2. It is a gas, so just for right now, I'm going to put the gas, the G, in parentheses right there to show that it is a gas. When we're at to produce, the to produce means we put the arrow there, and it says solid sodium chloride. Now the temptation is going to be to write NaCl2, but what we have to do is we have to write the formula NaCl, that's sodium and chlorine for sodium chloride, but then we have to check the charges like we did before. Sodium is in group 1 of the periodic table. It makes a +1 charge. Chlorine is in group 17. It makes a -1 charge. These charges cancel out. And so it says it is a solid, so I'm going to write the S in parentheses there also. This is called, again, a skeleton equation. So I'm going to write that right here. Skeleton equation means that it is not necessarily balanced out, it just shows what the reaction is. if you'll notice, we have 2 chlorines on this side, and we only have 1 chlorine on this side over here. That may bother you right now, but we're going to take care of it later on. We have 2 word equations here. We're going to practice writing out the chemical equation with the formulas. So we're going to start out with this first one here. It says aluminum oxide reacts with copper 1 sulfate. So that tells us what the reactants are, so we're going to go ahead and write those out. Aluminum oxide is Al and O, and I have to check the charges every time here. Aluminum has a +3, oxygen has a -2, so they have to crisscross. It ends up being Al2O3. Reacts with is going to be the plus. Copper 1 sulfate, here's copper, the 1 means the +1 charge. Sulfate is a polyatomic ion, SO4. It has a -2 charge. When we crisscross these, we're going to get Cu2SO4. And it says to produce right here. So the to produce tells us we put an arrow. Aluminum sulfate, and so we're going to write aluminum, Al, and the SO4. Again, we got to check the charges. Aluminum has a +3, sulfate has a -2, so we get Al2, and then in parentheses, we have to take SO4 3 times, and that's the and part. Copper 1 oxide, so here's copper, here's oxygen. Copper has a +1 because of the copper 1. Oxygen has a -2, it always does, and so we have to crisscross that one, Cu2O. So that is our skeleton equation because it possibly is not balanced. We have 3 sets of SO4 over here and only 1 set of SO4 over here. Again, we'll take care of that later. But let's go ahead and do this next one here. This says iron 3 chloride. The I tells you it's a binary compound. Reacts with aluminum, just plain old aluminum, to form. Now that's a little bit different. It's not to produce, but it's still to form or yield or to produce aluminum chloride and iron. So I'd like you to pause this and you try it out first, and then you'll be able to check with me. I'm going to get started on that right now, though. So iron 3 chloride is Fe, and then chloride is Cl. The 3 is the +3 charge on iron. Chlorine has a -1 charge according to the periodic table, so it's FeCl3. Reacts with just plain old aluminum. And notice I didn't put gases or solids or anything like that in here. To form aluminum chloride, AlCl. Again, I have to check the charges. Aluminum has a +3, chlorine has a -1, so this is AlCl3, and iron, Fe. And that is my skeleton equation. I don't put a charge on the iron or anything like that. It's just plain old iron. That's my skeleton equation for that formula. Okay, what I'd like you to do is take a look at these 3 word equations that I've given you. And on your notes, I'd like you to write skeleton equations for each of them. Make sure you put in the pluses and the arrows in the right places. And also make sure that you are checking the charges on any ionic compounds and crisscrossing if necessary. So bring these in with you tomorrow. Go ahead and push pause right now because this is going to end. Have a good night.